Alright, so if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know I used to post quite a few guides on decks that I would play a lot, and I would go through matchups, walk you through the deck list, what I think is good about the deck, what I think is bad about the deck, how I think the deck will change in the future, and today we're going to be going back to that kind of content, and we're going to be going over Zoroark EX. But before we start, I would just like to let you know that I haven't played Zoroark for too long. I don't know the ins and outs of it just yet. However, I am pretty comfortable that I could at least help you improve somewhere. I know somewhere in this video you will learn a thing or two about the deck, or about the list, or just a sequencing thing, or just anything that you didn't know you could do beforehand. If you guys want a more in-depth guide about this, I will leave Piper Lepine's link below. I haven't purchased the guide, but Piper Lepine is probably the best Zoroark player in the world, so I'm sure whatever she made is really good. So if you guys want a more in-depth look into Zoroark from someone that actually knows what they're talking about, I would definitely take a look at Piper Lepine's Metafy guide. I'll leave a link down below. And then I'll also leave not sponsored, so I'll leave my own Metafy link down there. If you guys want coaching or anything like that, you can pop by there. Anyway, so moving on. Today we're gonna be looking at two lists right now. I think right now the biggest debate amongst the Zoroark community is more so which list is better, and I think both lists have merit. This one over here is Gabriel Fernandez's list, list, and this one over here is Piper Lepine's. So you can tell they are a little bit different. Obviously, Piper Lepine is, I'm just going to refer to her as Piper from now. Piper is playing the Darmanitan, whereas if we look over at the side of Gabriel, he's not playing the Darmanitan, and also he's playing a few different Pokemon and obviously different counts and stuff, so the lists are actually quite different, and that is something that is quite cool. It's really nice to see a deck have success and lists are very different. For example, Dragapult usually just looks the same, right? Dragapult has Dragapult Dust Noir, and people experiment by putting in a Klefki and a Switch, right? Obviously, there's different versions of Dragapult, such as Straight Dragapult or Dragapult Charizard, but, you know, those are, in their own right, have basically very similar lists, right? Whereas Zoroark is its own archetype. Zoroark is one archetype. There's not really like a Zoroark Dusk Noir. It's just Zoroark. And the way you build Zoroark is obviously very different, because Zoroark is a deck that it doesn't really have a high power potential. You know, it doesn't have a Phantom Dive attack. It doesn't have Gardevoir's Energy Acceleration. It doesn't have Cerulege's high damage output, right? What it does have, though, is stability in the trade ability, and also a various and good plethora of attackers. Obviously, this version isn't playing as many attackers. However, it does still play a decent amount, right? Whereas if we take a look at Piper's list, it is playing the Okidogi, it is playing the Darmanitan, it is only playing one Reshiram. I'll speak about the one Reshiram very soon, and then obviously the Yveltal and Peck are present in both lists. So what would I say about this list? So I have been playing Piper's list. I prefer Piper's list over Gabriel's list, and that is for a few things. I think the Darmanitan is really, really strong, and that is because in my local area, there is a lot of Cerulege. And Cerulege, obviously, has the whole thing where it discards a lot of energy. And if we take a look at Darmanitan's first attack, right? People sometimes forget it has a first attack in general. If we take a look at its first attack, Backdraft, this attack does 30 damage for each basic energy card in your opponent's discard pile. So what does this kind of like tell us and show us? Well, if if Cerulege has 10 basic energy in their discard pile, you are swinging for 300 damage, right? They have 270 HP, so you only need 9 energy in the discard pile to actually one-shot them, in their discard pile to one-shot them, sorry. And in that case, for 9 energy in the discard pile, they're only doing 210 damage to you. So if they want to one-shot you, they have to discard a lot of energy. More than 9, right? And that's already the number that you're one-shotting them at. You do got to remember that if they discard something like Jet Energy, that doesn't count as a basic energy card, so it is not really something that will add to the tally of the energy. So I remember someone I was actually doing the math, and I realized that, wait, Backdraft doesn't count Jet Energy, and I kind of forgot about that, right? So I didn't actually one-shot them. So just keep that in mind. but it is a very good attack. And obviously, Flame Body Cannon is the attack that everybody knows this card for, and this has seen play beforehand, right? Flame Body Cannon, 90 damage, discard all energy from this Pokemon, and this attack also does 90 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Very nice. Obviously, the energy count there is really weird. You're never going to power it up with Fire Colorless. If you ever attack with the actual Darmanitan, you will be attacking with a reversal energy, but usually what will happen is you're going to use Night Joker for 2 dark energy, copy Flame Body Cannon, discard the 2 dark energy, and the next turn you'll use something like End's Point Up to actually get that energy back onto the Zoroark. We've seen stuff like Time Glass, Powerful Time Glass, I think, being attached as a tool card to Zoroark to get that energy back. However, Zoroark has pivoted away from Darmanitan, and honestly, you don't really need that anymore because a lot of the times you're never really attacking with Flame Body Cannon. Usually the main attacker in this deck will end up being the Reshiram's attack, and this is where the deck becomes really interesting. So I think this is a deck that has a really, just like most decks in this game, anyone can pick up any deck. However, there are some decks that are a lot more difficult to play perfectly than others. For example, if I pick up Gholdengo, I'll perfect Gholdengo a lot faster than I would be able to perfect something like Zoroark or Gardevoir, right? Because the deck has a lot more options. Gholdengo is a little bit more linear, but when you take a look at these kinds of deck lists, there's a lot of options, and you can get punished very heavily for not understanding the deck very well, because there's a very specific line that you have to take going into specific matchups, right? Whereas Gholdengo, its main line is just take knockouts and swing as much as possible, right? You boss up 2 prizes, you knock out with 5 energy, you get that energy back into your hand. If they don't have 2 prizes in play and only small Pokemon, you're going to be using your Zoroark and Lunatone engine to take prizes and draw more cards, and that's basically how Gholdengo works, right? Whereas Zoroark is a little bit more, there's more to it, right? It's sure it has the same end goal as Gholdengo. You want to take all of your prize cards. That is usually how you're going to win. However, it is not as straightforward as a path to get there. And you might be thinking, well, why would I not play just Gholdengo? Well, that's because Zoroark has a completely separate playstyle and identity to Gholdengo, and when you sacrifice that straightforwardness for more complexity, you also add a higher skill cap and also more potential to outplay your opponents. And now when you have a deck that has a higher skill potential, usually you'll see a lot of matchups become a little better. You'll have Gholdengo struggling against quite a few decks that Zoroark doesn't really struggle against, right? Like, we'll see Gholdengo has been losing quite a bit to something like Jelly Guardi. Zoroark doesn't, right? Zoroark is, in fact, that's probably Zoroark's best matchup, Jelly Guardi, right? Because obviously the main reason right now Zoroark is good, we can attribute it to its dark typing. Obviously, Zoroark is a dark type, and we can't ignore that. If Zoroark wasn't a dark type, it probably wouldn't see nearly as much play as it does right now. But because it's able to one-shot Gardevoir and Jellicent with Virtuous Flame, which is, it's basically its most vanilla attack, 170 damage, that's it, right, for 2 energy, which is not even a great number to hit. Dragapult does 200 plus 60 to the bench for 2 energy, right? Charizard does 180 at minimum for 2 energy, right? But it's nice because it's a dark type, it's one-shotting Gardevoir, it's one-shotting Jellicent, and those kinds of things like that. One-shotting Latias, which is also really a really nice thing. And then from there, you'll just think, okay, cool, you're going to use Night Joker, you can either copy Darmanitan, and you can either copy Reshiram. But then you can look at Reshiram yet again, and we'll see Powerful Rage. So this attack does have more of a stipulation to it. It does 20 damage, it does 0 base damage. So if you announce Powerful Rage, you'll usually do 0, unless you have damage on your Pokemon. So it does 20 damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon, but obviously you're not attacking with the Reshiram, you're attacking with the Zoroark. And Zoroark has 280 HP, because you are copying the Reshiram's attack. So if Zoroark has 100 damage on it, you are doing 200 damage. If Zoroark has, let's say, taken a Phantom Dive, it's tanked it from Phantom Dive, doing 200 to itself, well, now you're swinging for 400 damage, right? Very simple math. You basically look at whatever damage is on you, and you double it, and give it to the next person. Usually your opponent. So that is why this deck is pretty good, because it forces your opponent into weird situations where, for obviously Dragapult for most games, it'll just swing, right? It wants to do damage, it wants to spread damage. However, it's a bit more difficult in this situation because they can't just swing, because if they swing for 200 damage, they're just going to get one shot, right? And if they don't have a Dragapult set up for the following turn, then you can really get very far ahead by just one turn of Powerful Rage. And that's because your opponent didn't play around it. Ways they would play around this in the past would be use something like Dusk Noir, where they would pre-place 130 damage on your Zoroark and then do Phantom Dive for 200, essentially doing 230. 330 to it, knocking it out, and that bypasses the entire powerful rage kind of thing. I have an AirPod in, and I'm not even listening to music. In fact, I can hear stuff again. Yippee. So, obviously, there was ways to play around that. However, now, Psyduck is out, and we all know what Psyduck does. It says, basically, your opponent can't blow themselves up, right? Pokemon that have an ability to commit Sudoku, they can't do that anymore, right? They can't blow themselves up, and they're forced to just sit there. So, that kind of fixes that problem. And then we have another really useful card in the sense of Munkidori. Obviously, everyone knows what Munkidori does, and a Pokemon that already has a decent chunk of HP, Munkidori is just really great. It helps matchups like your Grimmsnarl matchup, it helps something like your Gardevoir matchup, your Dragapult matchup. Any matchup that will leave damage on your board state is helped by Munkidori, right? It is really nice. And not only is Munkidori really nice in those matchups, but even for matchups that don't actually leave damage on your board state, it can be really helpful. And that's with the introduction of a new card also from Mega Evolutions, the new Yveltal. So if you take a quick glance at Yveltal, it doesn't look like anything special. Clutch for 20 damage, your opponent can't retreat. We have seen this attack over and over again on things like Sudowoodo, on things like the Maractus, on things like the what is that thing called? The Feraligatr, the pre-evolution of the Feraligatr, little chomp guy. That's what I have. What's his name, bro? He's my starter in ZA, but I named him Bartholomew. So I can only think of his name as Bartholomew. But I hope you guys know what I'm saying. It has the attack Big Bite and they can't retreat. But regardless, 110 HP is fine, right? You're not really looking at it for the HP. Another really cool thing is that it has a free retreat cost, right? It means it's a really easy Pokemon to pivot in and out of. And you might be thinking, well, why is this just, like, why is this not just worse than Maractus? Because this, you know, has a actual energy cost of Dark, whereas Maractus is colorless. Well, it's because of its Dark type, and this is really important, not because it hits stuff for weakness, but more so because you can now use Pecharunt to switch something from the bench, usually like a Zoroark or whatever, into your Yveltal, and then your Yveltal will go into the active position, and it will now be poisoned, right? And the poison is super important. You might be thinking that's bad, because your own Pokemon is poisoned, but actually really good. Best thing possible is to poison yourself, which is very funny to say, but let's say, for example, you trap something in your opponent's active position. Let's say you trap a Fezandipity, which is usually something that is, you know, going to be trapped. Sure, you're doing 20 damage to it, but every turn you're going to be ticking 10 damage. In between turns, you're ticking 10 damage. So let's say I switch my Yveltal, so it's inactive now and it's poisoned, and then I will announce Clutch. That means in between turns, it'll take 10 damage. And then let's say my opponent can't move its Fez, so he will pass. It'll come back into my turn, and I will take another 10 damage, going up to 20 damage. And now this is where Munkidori comes in, because you've just generated a free 20 damage to move with your Munkidori. So now, even though your board state never had damage put on by your opponent, you've generated your own damage on your Yveltal that you can now move with Munkidori. So essentially now you can set up very easy, like not very easy, but you can set up checkmate scenarios where you are constantly clutching at stuff in the active position, and while this is happening, you are also spreading damage onto something else. And then, for example, let's say it's a Latias and a Fezandipity, and then once you finally deal enough damage, you can pivot into an Darmanitan and Flame Body Cannon and KO both of them at the same time, taking something like 4 prize cards. It's essentially like a pseudo Phantom Dive, if you think about it, right? Because you're doing 20 to the active, and next turn you'll be doing another 20 to active, but also a 20 wherever else you wanted. And if you have double Munkidori, you could do something like 10 plus 10, and obviously we all know that 10 damage counters can mean the difference between life and death. For example, how do we get more damage? Well, Binding Mochi, right? Binding Mochi is another great card that pairs incredibly well with something like the Pecharunt, because like we've already established, Pecharunt can swap a Dark Pokemon from your bench to the active position, and if you do that, that active Pokemon is now poisoned, and Binding Mochi says if your active, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is poisoned, you do plus 40 damage, right? And now, since we're usually going to be swinging with Virtuous Flame, that's probably your most common attack, you'll be doing 210 damage, and that is obviously really important, because that kills stuff like Fezandipity, like Ogerpon, right? That is a decent number to hit. It's much better than 170. 170, only thing that really one-shots is something like a Squawkabilly. And, you know, not every deck plays Squawkabilly. In fact, barely any deck plays Squawkabilly. So 170 isn't great. It's fine when you're swinging into something like a Dragapult or a Charizard, which you're going to be two-shotting regardless, right? That plus 40 means nothing to you. But when you're swinging into something that you would rather just one-shot, like that Fez, like a Pecharunt even, for example, it's just better to one-shot it, right? It just feels much better to do so. And then, obviously, we've got Fezandipity, which can attack in this deck. Obviously, Cruel Arrow is a decently powerful attack. It can, you know, it has snipe options. But then we have something that the Gabriel Fernandez's list, which we'll look at in a moment, doesn't have. And that's Okidogi. So, obviously, Okidogi, this, I guess you could, like, give this Pokemon the title of Fighting Ogerpon Abuser, right? This just kills the Fighting Ogerpon. Poisonous musculature, poisonous that word. It does for a colorless energy, search your deck for up to 2 basic dark energy cards, attach them to this Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. If you attach any energy in this way, it is now poisoned, right? Which is fine. It has 250 HP. It's a big, beefy basic. And then the second attack is Chain Crazed. If this Pokemon is poisoned, it does 260 damage, which is really good, right? 260 damage. What does that knock out? Well, Goldengo. Very nice. And with a Mochi, that's doing 300 damage. If you add plus 20 from the poison with a Munkidori, now you're swinging 320, one-shotting stuff like Dragapult, right? And that is something that is now pretty decent, right? It has a very nice, solid attack. And Dragapult can't just one-shot it, right? Even if you go Poison Musculature, even if they go Phantom Dive straight away, you're usually going to have like 230 HP or 230 damage on you. You now have access to multiple Munkidori to move it around, and then you can just kill it. And if they try to ignore this and gust around it, well, now you've got a 250 HP Pokemon that you can activate the poison yourself with your own Pecharunt that is now swinging for upwards of 300 damage, and plus that if you have something like a Munkidori established as well. So obviously a really strong attacker. However, this attacker doesn't come up as often as things like the Pecharunt itself would. So Pecharunt has an attack called Irritated Outburst for 2 dark energy. It does 60 damage for each energy for each prize card your opponent has taken. So if they've taken 1, it does 60. If they've taken 2, 120, then 180, then 240. 240, that's a pretty good number to hit. That's something that Ursaluna is able to hit, right? And then we have 300 is the max damage output with this card, because if your opponent has taken 6 prize cards, then you're going to lose the game, because that's kind of how this Pokemon game works. So usually you'll be swinging for something like 300 damage. You can't poison your own Pecharunt though, so it doesn't really get that advantage of the Mochi. But something that you can do with that, like, you know, obviously you can't poison yourself there, but you can include a card like Janine, right? Janine's Secret Art is a pretty decent card, and I kind of would like one of these cards in my deck. I'm not gonna lie, I think moving forward I'll probably be taking in a Secret Art, as choose up to 2 of your dark Pokemon. For each of those Pokemon, search your deck for a basic dark energy card and attach it to that Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. If you attach to your active, it is now poisoned. And obviously that's just nice. It gives you an extra way to poison yourself without putting Peck into play. It gives you a way to power up things a little bit faster. And it also gives you a way to attack with Peck now with a Mochi, meaning you can swing for 340 damage with the Peck. So it is a pretty decent card. I think as a one-off, it'll be quite nice, because you'll see the supporters in these decks, honestly, aren't great. Like, don't get me wrong, the supporters are fine. You're playing triple Cyrano, triple Boss, double Hilda, double Turo. These all feel great. However, you're only playing Iono as your only, like, draw supporter. And sometimes you don't really feel like you don't want to use Boss, you don't want to use Hilda, you've already used like Cyrano. So sometimes it might just be nice, like, to have a supporter that can accelerate a little bit more energy. But that's enough about speaking about, I think, the Pokemon. Moving forward, we can actually now speak about the rest of the deck. So we've got Cyrano. So you might be thinking, how do we set this up? Like, all this sounds great, but how do we set it up? Well, we have Buddy Poffin as our main Finding Zorua engine, basically. And the idea of this deck is to get, let's say, 3 Zorua in play early on, and then on the following turn you'll use a Cyrano to get your Zoroarks and evolve your Zoruas, and now you have 3 Zoroarks in play, and you're just trading stuff away. So it's nice. You play 3 Cyrano. Obviously, you're probably only going to use 1 Cyrano a game, because it's usually only going to look for your Zoroark, and then after that is just going to be trade fodder. That is something that is quite nice in this deck, is because things that don't come up in all matchups can just be traded away. Something like a Dragapult can't do that, right? If they have a tech card that is only good for 1 matchup, well, they don't just discard it unless they have Ultra Ball, because Recon Directive doesn't discard it, it puts it at the bottom of the deck, right? So they both have their pros, they both have their cons, but I would say obviously each deck is built tailored like towards their needs. Like you wouldn't build this deck if trade wasn't discarding stuff, right? Obviously discarding energy can also be quite nice because Ends Point Up attaches energy from your discard pile to your benched Ends Pokemon, which is really nice. You also just before I forget, you got to remember that Ends Point Up can actually power up your Darmanitan for the first attack with the backdraft against Ceruledge, so just keep that in mind when playing in that matchup. And yeah, so it is a pretty decent like draw engine, obviously, when you can just, you know, discard your Sirenos when you don't really need them anymore, and you can kind of play and set yourself up in a way where towards the end of the game, when you know you're going to need something like a Boss's Orders or a Turo at the end of the game, you can, you know, get them, you can use them earlier on and then pal pad them back into the deck and just make sure that you will be able to draw into them at the end of the game. Obviously, this deck has incredible draw power with the likes of Trade and Flip the Script. You can be drawing a lot of cards every single turn. And then on top of that, the A-spec of choice is Secret Box. Obviously, the Secret Box doesn't feel that good like as an A-spec as it would in Gardevoir, but the thing is, when you find Secret Box, you can just find, and you can have access to so many different things, right? You can, for example, get a Hilda, which can get you the Reversal and the Darmanitan. You can get a Counter Catcher with that. You can get an Artisan and an Air Balloon, right? So you can set up so many plays whenever you see Secret Box. Whenever you do actually see Secret Box, it feels amazing, and it just gives you, like, it just, you know, the whole problem with Secret Box in other decks is usually going to Arven for the Secret Box, and then you can't use that supporter to actually use it. So the Arven doesn't feel great grabbing a Secret Box, because if you want to, let's say, Secret Box and you want to grab yourself a Cyrano and a Counter Catcher, obviously you could do that if you found Secret Box raw in Gardevoir, but usually the main way to find it in that deck, and they rely on it a lot more than you do, right? You don't need Secret Box to set up. You have many other things to set up, such as Quad Buddy Buddy Puffin. That's something that Gardevoir doesn't play. They don't play Quad Buddy Buddy Puffin. They usually play 2 Buddy Buddy Puffin because they rely on finding Arven to find their Secret Box. And then we also play the double Artisan, same as Gardevoir, because Artisan is just really good at finding things like the Darumaka, Zoroark in themselves, Reshiram as our attacker, Monkey Dory, and Yveltal. Just all of these Pokemon come up so often and are just really good to be grabbed by Artisan. One of the tech cards in this deck is the Watchtower. Watchtower is really important in quite a few matchups, such as Charizard, right? Obviously, they are a Pidgeot build, so they rely on the Team Rocket's Watchtower. Any Terra deck, and the main one of these being Raging Bolt. So Raging Bolt is your worst matchup probably as Zoroark. It just doesn't really have a great time into it. I'm not saying there's no way to win that matchup. I'm just saying it is not easy to win. And the Team Rocket's Watchtower paired with like an Iono to 1 is usually kind of what's going to get you back into the game there. And that's really powerful. And that's another thing. Iono, a lot of the times, isn't used as a draw supporter. It can, look, don't get me wrong, it can get you out of sticky situations. Like today, I top decked Iono on my first turn going second, and my hand was dead. So I was very happy to see Iono, and I just ripped it, right? However, a lot of the times you'll be using your Iono more so as a way to disrupt your opponent rather than actually draw cards yourself. Because you're using Trade as your main draw engine. You're not using Iono as your main draw engine. Iono is more, like I said, for the disruption. And obviously you have quite a bit of recovery because you have very low counts of Reshirams and Darmanitans, right? You need to recover them. And something that I think I will be doing going forward, I know I said it on the stream the other day that one Reshiram feels perfectly fine, and you have many other ways to attack. However, I played a league challenge and 3 games in a row I prized my solo Reshiram, right? All 3 games, I had to get creative. I was taking prizes with Clutch. I was taking prizes with Darm. I was taking prizes with Okidogi. I was taking prizes with Pecharunt, right? And it just feels really bad. Like, all 3 of those games I could have won if I didn't prize the Reshiram. However, I ended up losing one of them to Dragapult because I just could not get going, and it was just difficult for me to actually do anything. Like, he would Phantom Dive my Zoroark, and I didn't want the Zoroark to die, so I'd have to use my Turo on the Zoroark to pick it back up, and he just kept sniping stuff like the Psyduck, putting 10 with a Holucha and my Zorua, and it just didn't feel good, right? So, a second Reshiram would be better, and that's where we kind of take a look at the list from Gabriel. So, it has the same idea, except Gabriel's list is a little bit more, I'd say, consistent. So you aren't playing the Darmanitan, you are kind of sacrificing. I guess you aren't sacrificing your Ceruledge matchup. It's just, it's not as easy as it would be with Piper's list, because you don't have that Darmanitan. Your way to beat the Ceruledge matchup is just straight up swinging into it and trading into it and hoping you can survive with a Hero's Cape, because then after that you can just one-shot them, right? And then you're usually trading better like that. However, in my opinion, that doesn't feel great, because when they put Legacy onto it, you're now trading, like, sure, you might be trading 2 for nothing for a turn, but after that you'll be going back to trading like 1 for 2, and honestly you're not really getting that 2 on that turn. It's usually going to only happen like in 2 turns. You'll be trading like 1 for I mean, you're not getting, that 1 prize card in that turn, because you can't just one-shot a Ceruledge. It has 170 HP. Another thing with this is that if Ceruledge does have a slow start and you actually just do swing with Virtuous Flame, they usually will like put damage onto you, even if they aren't KOing you. And even if they're putting like, let's say 30 damage, you now have a really nice line where you can Monkey Dory some damage off of the Zoroark onto their Ceruledge, counter catcher up, or boss's order something else, and then use Flame Body Cannon to kill that Ceruledge. Now that's, well, yeah, the Ceruledge has to be in the active because it's Terra Pokemon, so you would kill the Ceruledge in the active that you did 172 on the following turn, on the turn before, and then you plus the 10 off of like a Monkey Dory, and now you're going to be able to do 90 to the Ceruledge and then 90 to a bench Pokemon, usually taking 3 prizes in that turn, which is really nice, and that's something that can help even with the Legacy Energy, because even if they have a Legacy Energy on that Ceruledge in the active, well then you can kind of still say, alright, well I've taken 2 prize cards that turn instead of going 1 only, right? And Gabriel's list can't do that, right? Obviously, Gabriel's list does have a better matchup into things like the Kangaskhan, because he is respecting that by playing the Hooper. Hooper is also his out to the fighting Ogerpon, and just any deck that, you know, is a colorless type and weak to fighting, Hooper kind of rolls through that. He's also respecting the Reshiram a little bit more by playing 2 Reshirams, but you kind of have to play 2 Reshirams if you're not playing the other cards. He's also not playing the Okidogi, because, yeah, Okidogi has just been replaced by the Hooper EX, and it's just a little bit more, I guess, linear, but a little bit more consistent, because you can see now you're actually playing draw support cards. You're playing 2 Lose Determination, you're still playing your 3 Iono, and now you're playing up to 4 Cyrono, and a double E-switch can also be really nice, because it can help you power up things like the Hooper and the Pecharunt a little bit faster. You're only playing 2 boss instead of the 3 from the Pipers, and you're only playing 1 Turo because the other Turo has been converted into a penny. Because now the idea is you can use Monkey Dory, penny up to Monkey Dory with the energy, put it back down, and use it straight away. So a lot of times you don't need to discard that energy, and discarding energy kind of sucks. Obviously, you're not playing the reversal because you're not playing the Darmanitan, so you're just playing an extra Dark Energy 7, and then you have that all, like, cutting all those things. You have extra space for stuff like the second Team Rocket's Watchtower. You also have space for something like a Badoo, and Badoo is obviously just a great card. Badoo in this deck is basically the same as the Clefairy in this deck, and then you're playing Klefki basically instead of the Psyduck. So each of these are just respecting different things. Like this one is a lot more respecting of the Absol and Kangaskhan matchup, and anything that, you know, relies like on basic stuff. So you see the Klefki is trying to slow down things like Goldengo, things like Ceruledge as well, because obviously they rely on those early abilities like the what is that thing called? Squawkabilly and the Ursaluna and the Lunatone Soul Rock draw engine, right? Whereas this is kind of letting them get set up, and then once they set up, you're punishing them for setting up with the Darmanitan. So both decks have merit to it, and obviously this deck is not playing Hilda because you no longer have to find evolutions that aren't Zoroarks. That is your only evolution in the deck, so Cyrano just goes straight for that. And it's the same idea, you're playing for Cyrano because you want to see Cyrano as much as possible in the early game, and as soon as you see it, after that, you just trade that away, right? You're never going to use another one. Like, only once have I ever used 2 Cyranos, and that was, like, more so to thin the deck rather than anything, because it was the only supporter I had for that turn. And if I get Ionoed, I don't want to draw into the Cyrano and stuff like a Okidogi and stuff, so I was just grabbing stuff out of the deck. You're still playing the 2 counter catcher, your Nest Ball counts are up by 1, your Artisan is still the same, you're still playing Palpad, which is just an incredible item card in this deck. Air Balloon is also just a really nice addition to the deck as well. However, the deck is just really good. I'd say looking at your matchups, I would probably have to say that you have a pretty good time into most of the meta. Gardevoir is fine, Dragapult's fine, Goldengo is 50-50, Mega Absolbox is fine, Money Grimmsnarl is fine, Charizard is a bit of a difficult matchup, but I think if you understand how to play the matchup, it can be fine. Ceruledge is also perfectly fine, Terrabox is fine, Raging Bolt is, I would say, your worst matchup, and then obviously Zoroark is the mirror. But I think the deck is really good. Moving forward, I will be playing more of the deck. I actually picked up a second Alt Art Zoroark, but that's because I kind of want to give it to my girlfriend because Zoroark is her favorite Pokemon, or one of her favorite Pokemon, so, you know, once it rotates, I'll just give her a playset of Alt Art Zoroarks. But yes, that is about it today, guys. Thank you for watching. If you guys want more content like this, then yeah, smash like. If we get to, what's something? If we get to 300 likes, I will make another guide on whatever the top comment on this video is. I will be making a guide on if this gets 300 likes. Otherwise, have a good day. If you're playing in Dansk, good luck, guys. Love you all. Thanks for the support, and peace.